Okay, yeah. So I guess Larry, let me know when I should go. The City Council set new guidelines that require virtual meetings to be live streamed through the city's YouTube for all city designated public bodies, including but not limited to authorities, boards, commissions, committees, or councils, or any other committees or subcommittees under their authority. A link to join as well as the Office of Business Inclusion and Advancement's Bridge Line in case of any technical, well, any technical difficulties are below. I don't think. Okay, so with that, we are waiting to have one other person join us so we can have a quorum. So we will move past the adoption of the minutes and approval of the agenda, the adoption of the agenda and approval of the minutes. And so I will turn it over to Jakira to share the updates regarding the vice chair election. If you could share the results, Jakira.
Okay, prior to that, I'm going to call the roll for the MWBE Citizens Advisory Committee meeting being held today, November 24th at 4:30 p.m. Chair Kelly Easton.
Here.
Committee member Cassandra Brunson. Committee member Drew Gertzmeyer.
Here.
Committee member Cornelius Graves. Committee member Jordan Gwynn.
Present.
Committee member Stephen Hemrick.
Here.
Committee member Leah Metz.
Present.
And committee member Ethel Witt. Also on this call today, we have the Office of Business Inclusion MWBE staff, Alex Bohannon, Handa Hernandez, as well as the Director of Sanitation, Taisha Hinton, and Larry Bell with the Marketing Department. So during the last two sessions that we had at our regular meeting in October and a special meeting called on September 29th, the MWBE Citizens Advisory Committee held their first two sessions to review the MWBE CAC ordinance as well as the MWBE program policy, and you all provided suggestions and recommendations for our program to enhance it. So I have provided in the minutes the suggestions and recommendations that that you all provided. I will ask that you all review those recommendations and suggestions and provide any revisions to me, but by December 4th. It's just to make sure that what I have listed is clearly what you all intended as a suggestion and or recommendation. And just to note that in the upcoming year, we will be working on the implementation of the recommendations from the disparity study. So the committee asked me to provide immediate goals, short-term and long-term goals. And so I think by March, when we do have the disparity study implementation plan put in place, I will be able to provide you all with what we're able to do immediately, as well as the short and long-term goals.
Okay.
And does anyone have any questions?
And I would just like to, again, just thank you, Jakira, for reviewing the policy with us. And then also just stress the importance for all advisory board members to take a look at those notes and make sure that any recommendations that you've made are outlined. And again, just thank everyone for putting in the time to hear the review as well as to give those recommendations. And then as Jakira moved forward with preparing her report to go before City Council, her and I did discuss that there will be an opportunity for her to share just share some of her findings, provide a high-level overview of what she plans to share with City Council. So that will be we'll make so during that time, everyone will be able to make sure that we're all moving forward on the same page in terms of our recommendations. And then beyond that, I know I had reached out to Jakira to have a conversation with Stephen regarding the presentation that he had mentioned in one of our previous meetings. And so I just felt that that information, as he was just providing a few comments of that presentation, I felt it would be helpful for our advisory board to receive that information. He did mention that it was going to be an hour to an hour and a half. And so I asked for, so at that time, so I'm coming before you now, the board, just to get your thoughts around either extending our next meeting or us coming together for a special meeting. We are not able to vote on that, but I would like to receive everyone's feedback. And before, I guess we even have that discussion, Steve, do you mind just sharing give us an overview of your presentation that you did for I guess it was a state group that works on MWBE?
Sure. So I've done a few different ones, and I actually talked to Jakira about this offline about that. I've done a few different presentations that are geared to different groups, and there may be one that's more appropriate for this body. But the one you're referring to is the one I did last week. It was actually a 3-part series I did with 2 other individuals through the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights. It was a 3-person panel that included me to give the legal perspective on contracts for subcontractors and DBEs. Henry Lanier, who's the president of Lanier Construction, down towards the eastern part of the state, he's worked as both a sub and a prime on DOT projects for about as long as I've been alive, probably. And also Warren Walker, who has been a resident engineer for DOT. So we kind of had 3 different perspectives and walked through over the course of 3 days in 3 separate hour-and-a-half presentations, contracting considerations and just kind of some project guidance for DBEs on how to do business on DOT projects. We split it into 3 days of kind of before the project, during the project, and after the project, with some case study examples for people to talk about. But that one was really DOT centric. So everything we talked about was truly geared towards the DOT space. I actually did a separate presentation not too long ago for the city of Greensboro. Does a Med Week, the Minority Enterprise Development Week every year. And a couple or 3 years ago, Brian Scott that I work with and I had done a presentation in person, and we got invited back this year to do it via Zoom, just a subcontracting basics that is more applicable, not in the DOT space, but in the kind of private and general public contracting areas. So more your city type projects and things of that nature, not so much the DOT dealing with subcontractor approval forms and the DOT spec book and things like that. So that one I think would be the most useful for maybe everybody on our committee to know about, or the people with whom the city's minority enterprise office or the business inclusion office is dealing with, for them to know, because it's helpful information for the types of projects that these folks are actually on. I have a number of people down in Greensboro that, they hear the presentations and then reach out to me about the issues that they're having on Greensboro projects, Charlotte projects, kind of around the state, and how the contracting principles and redlining your contracts has been helpful for them. So that's kind of the high level of what we talked about in the DOT piece. And then the other presentation, the Medweek one, was entirely the legal perspective, but just talking about key contract provisions and things to try to look for, be aware of in a construction contract as a subcontractor, which is where most of these DBEs are falling. Or I say DBEs, I'm still in DOT mode, MWBEs.
Okay, thank you. And there was something that you said, and I can't remember what it was, but I want to say it was around the conversations we were having about advocacy. And I felt that it would be helpful for us to review, for you to review that, to share the information with us. But let me ask you, do you think that that information could help inform our recommendations, for the policy or for the work that this committee would do?
So I don't know that the information would be as useful for that. I think the biggest use that our committee would have for that type of information would be to maybe get some of the business inclusion office people involved and kind of know some of that information so that they could share it with some of the MWBEs that they deal with or that have problems on projects. Or if we wanted to try to set up some type of educational session for MWBEs, it's easier now than it has been in the past to do an educational session via Zoom or WebEx, or we used GoToWebinar through the DOT project presentation last week, and it was really successful. People don't have to travel and deal with getting off a job site as much. So it's really information geared towards the businesses, not so much people like us, unless you own a business and are going to do a construction contract. But I don't think that many of the folks on this committee are signing construction contracts, except for maybe Drew. And he's in a totally different perspective on that, a different position. So I think the most use of that information would, like I said, be for the business inclusion office people, or if we wanted to try to set up an educational session for, City of Winston-Salem registered MWBEs, something like that.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. I can't remember what was said, but then I was thinking, oh, well, if he's, giving these presentations and he's on our committee, it could be helpful for that. But yeah, I think that's a recommendation that, we can make. I know this office does different events in the community. I don't know how many of those are just specializes in like the legal aspect for construction, so that nevertheless, I feel like it could be helpful to continue to have that conversation. But so disregard the presentation for this committee. I don't think is necessary, but we can just make it a recommendation that part of our list. Okay. So
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Shakira.
Before we move on, I just want to add that there was one question that Leah asked during the first session about when was the last time the good faith effort process in North Carolina General Statute was revised, and I'm still waiting on a response from the School of Government. So when I do receive that answer, I'll provide it to you all.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so one of the things, as I rode right past the roll call, I know there was an announcement regarding the vice chair. So is that something that we can share?
Yes, we can. So the committee was asked to nominate individuals from this committee for the vice chair role, which will serve a one-year term. So Cornelius Graves was nominated, Jordan Gwynn, Stephen Hemrick, Leah Metz, and Ethel Witt. The votes came in at 4 votes for Leah Metz, 2 votes for Ethel Witt, and 1 vote for Stephen Hemrick. So Leah Metz has been voted or elected the vice chair of the MWBE Citizens Advisory Committee. So congratulations to you, Leah.
Congratulations. Okay, so It doesn't appear that that anyone joined. You see all your congratulations in the chat, Leah. Yeah. So I guess in terms,
we have one more committee member, Cassandra.
okay, okay, great. Hello, Cassandra. How you doing? Thanks for joining.
Thank you. I'm so sorry about my tardiness.
Oh, no problem. We're glad you're here. So we can, okay, so everyone should have received the agenda and the minutes. Jakira sent them out earlier this week. So is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll motion to adopt the agenda.
Is there a second?
Jordan Gwynn, a second.
Okay, thank you. And again, everyone should have also, like as I said previously, received the minutes. So is there a motion for the approval of the minutes?
I'll motion for approval of the minutes.
Is there a second?
Cassandra Brunston, I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Both the agenda has been adopted and the minutes have been approved. And so now we will turn it over to Alex Bohannon to go over the Holden Building Company and the fire station number 13, pre-construction good faith effort review.
Do we need to go through the roll call and vote on approval?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
So if someone
All right.
could make a motion to approve both the minutes and the agenda, we can do that so we don't have to go through it twice.
Okay.
So I motion to approve both the minutes and the agenda at the same time.
Okay. And then there's a second.
A second, Jordan, second.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Kelly Easton,
Yes.
Committee Member Cassandra Brunson,
You're on mute, Cassandra.
Yes, thank you, Kelly.
Committee Member Drew Gertzmeyer,
Yes.
Committee Member Jordan Gwynn,
Yes.
Committee Member Stephen Hemrick,
Yes.
and Committee Member Leah Metz.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. And so now it's your turn, Alex.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone has been doing well. I'm going to share my screen now. What you should see before you is the PowerPoint for the good faith effort submitted by Holden Building Company for Fire Station 13, which is a new project. For this project, the established MWBE goals were 19% and 13%. If you all notice, this is typically higher than what we see normally, and this is just because when we have vertical construction in a project, the established MWBE goals tend to be higher, and that's based on just some more common trades, some more opportunity for some more common trades. The goals that were submitted by Holden are 3% for minority-owned firms and 6% for women-owned firms. So beginning with the affidavit D, I just have a screenshot there for you of the, this is just the beginning of the affidavit D, where they have included the firms that they will be working with on this project. Then beginning with letter A, did a representative of your company attend the pre-bid solicitation or pre-bid meeting scheduled by the city to inform MWBE firms of contracting, subcontracting, and supply opportunities, and to review contractor requirements of complying with the program? They did attend the pre-bid meeting. It was on November 5th. and it was at 3 p.m. So that's been confirmed. Are there any questions about item A? Okay. Moving on to item B, did your company advertise in general circulation, trade association, or minority-focused media concerning subcontracting opportunities? In order to receive the full 15-point allocation, they needed to advertise with with 3 different mediums. And so here they advertised with the Hispanic Contractors Association, I Square Foot, and Dodge Data and Analytics. And so the first screenshot to the left of the screen is an email that was sent to a person who works for Construct Connect. And Construct Connect and I Square Foot are kind of that's the email that's associated with the company that is that Construct Connect is similar to I Square Foot. So I think that they actually advertised with maybe 4 different mediums, because they included screenshots from Construct Connect, and then the one to the right is from construction.com, which when you go to that website, it's Dodge Data Analytics. Like it changes when you put in the URL. And then this is the email that they sent to the Hispanic Contractors Association. So for item B, they'll receive the full 15-point allocation. Are there any questions for item B? So for item C, did your company provide written notice to a reasonable number of specific MWBE firms that their interest in the contract is being solicited at least 10 days before bids are due? In addition, they have to advertise to at least 3 or more firms, and each solicitation shall include a specific description of the work to be subcontracted, location where bid documents can be reviewed, name of representative of the prime bidder to contact, and location and date and time. They can receive a total of 15 points for this. So what they included in for this item is I put one screenshot here because there were multiple pages, probably about 15 pages of what you see on the left, which is essentially where they pulled from their software that they use to solicit firms, where you can literally tell the date that request was sent, and then on the right hand side you can tell whether or not that they are going to bid, or whether or not they've opened the request or anything like that. So and then to the right is pulled from their solicitation that has a specific description of the work, and location and contact information for their point of contact and how to get in touch with them. So they would receive the full point allocation for item C. Are there any questions about item C? And then this is additional, these are additional screenshots that I've included in here, where they have the link to view the plans and all of the other pieces of their letter, of their invitation to bid. So for item D, did you follow up initial solicitation of interest by contacting MWBE firms to determine with certainty whether they were interested? And for this one, they need to include a telephone log. So here, as you can see, they have identified the firms, and they've written the date, and then they've written in what they did, whether or not they said they were going to bid. They've written yes and then circled that, or whether or not they left a message, and then they've gotten maybe a yes at a later date. And so that's been indicated here. And then I've included like the additional pages. This was another multiple page document for this one. So you can see where they've written the date, which is of course the 10-day follow-up. And then there's an additional page there. I'm sorry, are there any questions about letter D, item D?
I have one quick question. How are they identifying the call log? Are these people or companies they work with in the past, or they're pulling it from a pool of MWBE's listings somewhere?
So based on just me reviewing the materials, it looks like they pulled it from multiple sources. They reached out to me directly to get our suggested subcontractor list, but also using places like iSquareFoot and other locations to pull those firms from. It looks like they've used multiple places, and then their advertisement with the Hispanic Contractors Association and other places might have gotten them additional firms as well. So I'd imagine it's a combination.
Combination. Okay, and I hate to take us back, but on letter C, you mentioned one of those resources that they use. Go to the last slide that you had there, and you said that it was pulling. I forgot the word that you use. I'm trying to use the same word that you use, but basically it sounded like it was like not going to that website that was intended. It was going somewhere else and maybe doing some distracting things on it.
Oh, you're talking about the
what was it?
I think this was for item B. This is where when you went in.
Dodge data, yeah.
Yeah. So when I put the because what happened is that in their good faith effort they mentioned in a heading that they used these 3 places. But then in the screenshots themselves, when I looked at the emails and I said, well, Dodge Data and Analytics isn't in any of these email names. But then when I plugged the URLs into my just a Google Chrome search engine just to kind of see, it took me to Dodge Data and Analytics. So it's one of those things probably where one website has bought another website and then they just continue to use those same email addresses.
Okay, so will we consider that as an effective site then?
Yes, because so me just going to verify that that's actually the place that they were using is different than subcontractors who would use it via, like, they wouldn't go to that website necessarily the same way.
Oh, they might do like a login and password or something.
Right, and then they're able to get those firms. So they don't go the same route that I did just to verify it, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right, yeah, that clears it up, because I was like, well, if people aren't able to get to it directly, then they probably need another source and need to get rid of that one. But okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
Okay, so for item E, how did your company identify and select portions of work to be performed by MWBE firms in order to increase the likelihood of MWBE participation, including where appropriate, breaking down contracts into economically feasible units to facilitate MWBE participation? Please provide a copy of documentation where this information was included. So here I've included a screenshot of the part of their invitation to bid that actually lists out the varying trades and the scope of work for the project. So as you can see, it is everything from surveying to grading to water and sewer to asphalt, fencing, all the way up to HVAC and electrical and things like that. So that's all there. And so for item E, they would receive the full point allocation. Are there any questions about item E? Item F, explain how you provided interested MWBE firms with equal access to specifications, plans, and requirements of the contract. Plans are available through I've included a screenshot where they had a link in their invitation to bid. That anyone could click on to access the plans, which would count as equal access. So for item F, they would receive the full 10-point allocation. Are there any questions about item F? Okay, for item G, how have you negotiated fairly with interested MWBE firms, not rejecting the MWBE as unqualified without sound reasons based on a thorough investigation of their capabilities? Here is where we asked them to submit the subcontractor quote comparison form, which they did. And so this is the first page of that. So they've divided that up by trade as like we asked. And for termite treatment, and for grading, utility, and asphalt, it looks like they only received one quote from an MWBE. And for each of those areas except for, for termite treatment and grading, the MWBE was not the lowest bidder. But then for utility and for asphalt, they so for utility they did use the MWBE, and then for asphalt, the WBE, Yadkin Valley Paving, was not the lowest bidder, and so they went with their lowest bidder. Continuing on, for concrete, for site concrete, and then for building concrete, they received multiple MWBE quotes, but they went the low bidder was not an MWBE. And then for the same for masonry, except for they did not receive as many MWBE quotes. And then for steel, they did not, the WBE quote was actually not the lowest, but they went with it anyway because they had the complete scope. Their lowest bidder did not have a complete scope for that one. And then for casework, they use the MWB, the WBE, and for roofing, they use an M. For joint sealants, they used a W. And then for hardware, they did not, and they did not receive any MWB quotes for hardware. Overhead doors, there were no MWB quotes. Same for storefront. And then they went with a WBE for tile, and then they didn't receive any MWBE quotes for flooring. They went with an M for painting. And then I think that might be the last page. Nope, one more. And then they didn't receive any MWBE quotes for sprinkler, plumbing, or HVAC. And then they received one WBE quote that was BECO, but they were not the low for the electrical. And so they went with the non-MWBE for electrical because they were the low. Are there any questions about letter item G?
Yeah, did you say they went with the MBE for roofing?
Yes, they went with an MBE for roofing. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And do we know if there were any attempts to negotiate with any of these vendors?
We do not. That was not something that I asked, but when a contractor joins, you can ask that question, because it seems like, based on, I mean, there was a comment under joint sealants about, and I think some other places where it said that their scope may not have been complete for the offer. So, you know, I'm not entirely sure whether or not they negotiated or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is Jordan. Just a quick question about the question around negotiation. I feel like we've asked that in the past as it relates to these subcontractors and them submitting bids to the GCs. And I feel like the sentiment when we talk to the GC in the past is that that's not a thing they do, and actually it's looked down upon in the industry and kind of can be perceived, at least the way I interpreted it, was like as like kind of contract fixing or something of that nature. Does anyone with any more construction experience have anything that they could add there? Is that something that we should expect, you know, when we see these contractor or quote comparison forms? Is that the GCs are negotiating with these subs, or is that kind of not the right practice that we would anticipate seeing?
So I think I can give you a little bit of information. Bear in mind that I'm not one of the people out there bidding on these. And Drew may have some input he can give to, but you know, these I think are what people would typically call hard bid. So typically the number's the number. They may be able to go back and ask somebody about, hey, your scope looks different or something like that, if they think that there's a misunderstanding on what is supposed to be included. But really, the only type of numbers changes I would see would be, say, if a sub sent in their bid and said they excluded bonding, but the prime wanted a bond and was willing to pay the premium or something like that. Typically they're not just going to be able to call them on a hard bid project and say, hey, can you knock your number down? That's a little bit, it's like you said, it's like contract fixing almost. Like, I want to use this person, so I'm going to try to get them to squeeze into what I need.
Right.
They'll negotiate on things on the back end maybe, but as far as submitting bids, it's typically kind of, this is the bid, this is the number, unless there's something off with the bid as far as the scope or something like that, or quantities, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, like you said, for a clarification, I mean, that definitely is a good time to get into it, but not being a negotiated job where they're selected initially and then working on price together, it definitely, on some of these, like for a sprinkler with 5 folks on there, I think the other 4 would be likely to maybe keep showing up in the end. I don't know for the next ones, aside from, how, even if it were a casual setup, I don't know. But yeah, that's, in this type of hard bid job, it would only be clarifications, is my understanding.
Yeah, I guess, so I understand that. And I think that just goes why it's important, why I made a recommendation in terms of equity, having some type of equity policy as part of this work. I'm not 100% sure what makes sense, in this field. But when, this item is worth 25 points, and it appears to be that, the question is, how have you negotiated fairly? So I'm thinking that this clause was put in there because a lot of times, we may find that minority firms may overbid, and a lot of that just probably has to do with what I would assume is the fact that they may have to do that in order to have greater capacity. So so that's one of those things that we need to. Thanks for the discussion around this, and I don't know how this should be handled, but apparently this is something that needs to be addressed if it, to find out how it can work. And if it doesn't work, if it's against best practices, then what can we do?
So I can give you a little information on, I think, how we may be looking at the word negotiating a little bit differently than it might be intended on the form and in the regulation. So that whole piece of the reg is about not rejecting the subs as unqualified. So it's not so much about negotiating the numbers down actively, because everybody kind of understood, I think, going into drafting what this good faith effort process would look like, that there would be hard bid projects where that's not really in the cards, that negotiating in the way that we think of it typically isn't going to happen. But the point of that piece, I think, is that the primes aren't rejecting an MBE as unqualified, saying you can't do the work or you don't know how to do the work without some reason. So it's that they really are just looking at, did this proposed sub that submitted a proposal to me or submitted a bid to me, were they the low bidder or not? It's really a matter of, if the M or WBE was the low bidder but then not used, that the prime needs to be able to justify that as saying, look, they're not qualified to do the work, or they didn't bid the right thing. That's my understanding, and always has been, of the regulation.
Yes.
And so that's the way that I look at it here. It's not that they need to be working the numbers down for these subs, but that they just can't reject them as unqualified.
Reject them as unqualified if they are not the lowest.
if they are the lowest.
They are.
So basically,
yeah. So there are two that are the lowest, and they don't go with the lowest. Then, okay. So yeah, I get that point. Thank you.
So, question though, do the regulations state that they have to go by the lowest, or they could actually pick anybody within, no matter what the price is, especially if they were trying to meet the percentage points? Are they restricted by that low bid?
You know, as far as this regulation goes, right, and you can look, I think I just sent the link to this one actually, or to the whole subchapter, or at least the subchapter section in the regulations on minority business participation goals. But basically the regulation, so 30I.0102 puts out these 10 factors and gives them point values. And so when you look at the negotiating, it doesn't say anything about you have to use the low bidder or you don't have to use the low bidder, but because the government entity, in this case the city, is required to select the lowest qualified bidder by the bidding statutes, the primes are incentivized to use their lowest qualified bidders because they want to have the lowest price. So they might have to make some judgment calls though on, say, if an M or a WBE isn't the low bidder, you know, is it close enough that they think they can still use that slightly higher price and still be the low qualified bidder to get the city project? So it's a real tightrope that they have to walk. And that's why if you talk to any prime, when they talk about bid day, it's they want to pull their hair out and just go crazy, because typically they're getting all of these bids that we see on the bid comparison form all at one time, like an hour or 30 minutes before the bid deadline. And they're just on the phone, like trying to figure out, are the scopes right? Do they need a clarification from somebody? You know, and get everything pieced together so they can get their final number and put together their packet to give to the city. The point of this piece of the regulation, my understanding has always been, is to incentivize the primes to, if there is an M or a WBE that is a low bidder, to actually use them if they appear qualified. So really what it says is that the prime's got to have some actual reason to believe that a low bidding M or WBE is unqualified to do the work that they bid on before they reject that bid and go with like the next highest one or the next lowest one. So I know that was really roundabout, but it's basically, my understanding of this piece is that it's to prevent not using a low bidding M or WBE, but it wouldn't necessarily incentivize a prime or require a prime to use an M or WBE that is not a low bidder. Because then they're just considering that bid like they would any other bid. And if you talk to any of these primes, all they're ever going to tell us is, we just looked at them, bids are bids, it is what it is, unless they've, you know, had a bad experience with a sub or something and gotten burned on a project. Then they're probably going to say, I'll say this because I know the performance fire protection people. Like, I worked with PFP before and I don't like those guys. I'm not going to hire them. But other than that, they're just going to tell you a bid's a bid.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I think the key word is, you know, what is the incentive? And I think that's what continues to come up with all of, you know, as we go through these policies and even go through these questions. So thank you for sharing that. That's helpful.
And just to answer Jordan's question, this subcontractor comparison quote form was a request that was made by the committee, just so you guys could see the quotes side by side.
Um, Jakira, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I think Jordan had a question about the subcontractor comparison quote form, and this form was created by the request of the committee, so that you all could see the quotes side by side.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah, I think it's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Letter H, what services were used from the City of Winston-Salem's WBE office? Available minority community organizations, minority contractor groups, local, state, and federal minority business assistance offices, and other organizations that provide assistance in recruitment and placement of WBE firms. So they have provided, in the submission of their affidavit, of their good faith effort, they provided a screenshot of an email with me. But I know based on previous conversations that they've also used the Hub website. They just did not include that screenshot in here. But for full transparency's sake, I do know that they have been utilizing the Hub website as well. So I would say, I know that they did not provide a screenshot from the Hub website, but at the very least, they've used one, which would give them 5 points. That's what they provided evidence for. But if you're so inclined to take me at my word, they have used two. Are there any questions about item H? Okay, letter I, how did your company provide assistance to an otherwise qualified minority firms in need of equipment, loan capital, lines of credit, joint pay agreements to secure loans, supplies, letters of credit, including waiving credit that is ordinarily required? Did your company assist minority firms in obtaining the same unit pricing with the bidder suppliers in order to help minority firms in establishing credit? They need to provide a copy of that documentation. So here in their invitation to bid, I've included a screenshot from there that says that if you need any assistance in obtaining required bonding, loan capital, lines of credit, licenses, joint pay agreements, or insurance, please contact us. So here they would receive evidence of offering. So that would be, they provided evidence of offering, so they will receive 10 points, not the additional 10 points for implementation. Are there any questions about letter I? For letter J, how did your company provide assistance in obtaining required bonding or insurance, or providing alternatives to bonding or insurance for subcontractors? Here, within that same screenshot, they said, if you need assistance in obtaining required bonding, loan capital, lines of credit, licenses, joint pay agreements, or insurance, please contact us. So the insurance piece is evidence of offering, not implementation. So they would receive 10 points for letter J as well. Are there any questions about letter J? Letter K, they did not provide, this is the item that concerns joint ventures. They did not provide any evidence to support any point allocation for item K. So they would receive 0. Are there any questions about this one? And then lastly, letter L, did your company provide quick pay agreements and policies to enable minority contractors and suppliers to meet cash flow demands? What procedures were initiated to fulfill this requirement, and how were MWBE firms informed of this assistance? They can receive 5 points for offering, 10 points for implementation. So in their invitation to bid from the same screenshot, they automatically pay twice a month on submission of a qualified invoice. So, and as we've discussed and sort of applied this standard on previous projects, if they say that they're going to do that in their invitation to bid, that's evidence of both offering and implementation. Are there any questions about letter L or any of the items for this good faith effort? Okay, please be sure to submit all of your scores by 5 p.m. tomorrow. via the form that Jakira included in her email. Because of the holiday, I'm going to have those scores to you all out sometime in the first couple of days of next week, after I have all of the scores in. Are there any final questions for me? All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Alex. Do we have Holdings with us? Are we bringing him on?
That's what I was gonna.
Yes, he should be joining us.
Okay. All right. Are they on hold or they haven't called in yet?
No, they haven't called in yet. I'm actually trying to get them on the phone now.
Okay. While we're waiting, Stephen, the presentation that you did for Greensboro, I know you said it's going into the contracts and mainly working with primes, looking to work with the city, if I understood you correctly. Is there a portion of that goes over good faith efforts?
No, so it really just looks at, from the subcontractor's perspective, negotiating contracts with the prime. It doesn't go into the good faith effort process at all, except for, I think I do mention when we talk about terminations of subcontracts that on a public job, like a city of Winston-Salem job or city of Greensboro or Charlotte, Asheville, any of these cities that have offices like the business inclusion office, right? They all have participation goals on their projects that are required by statute. So, and they all have a version of the same M or WBE replacement process, that there's an administrative process that has to be followed to replace an M or WBE on a project once a prime's committed to using that M or W. So, it kind of limits a prime's ability to get rid of a sub without actually jumping through some additional hoops. But that's really all that I say about it. It's a negotiation tool you've got. And no matter what, anyway, you should be trying to avoid being terminated anyway, especially for costs, because that looks bad on your record when you start applying for other projects. But that's all I really say about it. I don't go into the in-depth of what the process looks like.
Okay, thank you. And it looked like we have Mr. Wilbur Holden has joined us. So, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you. Jakira.
So, Wilbert, we have reviewed the good faith effort submitted by Holding Building Company Incorporated. And so feel free to give the committee a little context about your good faith effort, and then they'll ask you some questions if there are any.
I'm sorry, just give us an overview.
You can provide the committee with some context about the good faith effort that you all submitted, and then the committee will ask questions if they have any.
Okay. Has Chuck signed on?
Chuck is on now, I believe. Yes.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Can I? You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm trying to see anyone I can speak to. Can you repeat the question so that I can speak to it, please?
Oh, I just stated that you all have the opportunity to provide context to the good faith effort that was submitted by your company, and then the committee will ask questions if there are any.
Okay, so the good faith effort began on, I believe, around October the 20th. I think that's when the invitations were sent out, and then I was in quarantine, and that was when my good faith calls began. And we always try to make the good faith calls in plenty of time. We use the pipeline system to accomplish our good faith goals by sending out the invitations to bid. And then it's helpful because it prints out the list of MWBEs and the phone numbers broken down by scope that I call. And I've gotten to know a lot of the subcontractors that I call. And then I spoke to you, Jakira, called to get the information that was sent to me by Alex, the spreadsheet, and a lot of those names I was familiar with. And so I made the good faith effort to make the follow-up phone calls. I have a standard procedure of listing the job with the Hispanic Contractors Association, as well as I have a contact in Chicago with Construct Connect, who puts the job on all of their platforms. I think the one that you're most familiar with is I Square Foot, but it does also include CMD. And I believe another one that you may be familiar with is Bid Clerk, but I also contacted Dodge Analytics. So I was pleased with the response that I got from talking to the MWBEs that I called, and we got a lot of subcontractor quotes in the days not only of the bid, but leading up to the bid. So there was a lot of interest in this job.
Does anyone from the committee have any questions for Chuck or Mr. Holden?
Yeah, I've got a couple Do you feel like overall, did you get enough MWBE bids between all the different categories?
I think that I've got the ones that we had listed, and looking at, I mean, certainly we would like to get more in certain categories. I mean, you take, for example, the sprinkler scope. I mean, we're typically not, you don't see like you're going to get any in that particular category. I'm always particularly pleased that we get some from the electrical scope. I know Piedmont Performance Plumbing's told me that they were going to be sending in a proposal. To my knowledge, I don't think Piedmont Performance Plumbing out of King, North Carolina, I don't think they did send in a proposal. BECO is an electrical subcontractor. They did send in a proposal. I know that Mr. Andrews, a plumber out of Winston-Salem, he decided not to bid this job. I'm not even sure if Mr. Andrews has continued to stay in business. You know, the concrete subcategory, we did seem to get pretty many MWBE quotes. I would have to look back. I mean, I can pull it up on my computer. I'm sorry I don't have that pulled up right now. But overall, I think that there was pretty good coverage. But then, you know, as usual, you do have certain scopes that is lacking.
Is there a thought as to why they're lacking? Or why you're not getting in, you know, actual bids in those areas? From MWB, sorry, just to clarify.
Well, I'm constantly trying to update our database. If, for example, there was a company that I added, there was a company that I added to our database today that was, and I'll tell you who that is. It was an HVAC subcontractor that I didn't have as a hub, and I wasn't familiar with this company. And I added them to the list. It was a refrigeration company. I think they were called QRC. And I had never heard of them before, but I added them, so now they're a part of our list. So going forward on City of Winston-Salem projects or any other projects, QRC will now be a part of our database and part of our invitation list. So I don't know why for particular scopes we don't get more quotes, but Holden Building Company is constantly updating our list so that we do. We're constantly looking for more MWBE companies to add to our list, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you. And then my other question goes to letter K on our good faith effort, and it's around, does your company negotiate a joint venture or partnership agreements with minority firms to increase opportunities for minority participation? Have y'all done that in the past?
I'll let Mr. Holden speak to that.
We have in the past talked to MWBE contractors in attempts to joint venture. It's a little difficult, but we're willing. We've talked to it's just a matter of trying to get your MWBE contractor and Holden Building, for example, together for a particular project, which would take longer than the bid invitation allows. In order to do a joint venture, you actually do a whole new company that has to be bonded as a separate entity. So it's a pretty difficult, lengthy process. And it's very difficult to go into one project. And I think you can do that where you're at CM at risk, where there's a longer period of the steps to get the job. But in a duration of here's a job, let's go get it, it's a little tough. Also, the contractors we've talked to, it's never been the perfect situation to proceed. What I mean by that is maybe the projects were too big. Maybe we didn't have the exact pieces together to make it happen. So it's a difficult thing to joint venture. But we are willing, very willing. We've talked to people and tried, but it just hasn't happened.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions from the committee?
I have a question. It may turn into a comment, but we'll see. Okay, so the minority participation was 3%, correct? And the goal was 19?
The M was 3 and the WBE was 6, I believe.
Right. Okay. So for the M, that was alarming and, rather low. And when we looked at your database of calls, and then also the comparison list for those subs that you did use versus the one that you did not use, I was just wondering if the databases that you now advertise to get the bid out there is iSquareFoot and Construct Connect, correct?
Construct Connect is an umbrella, and under, if you'll hold on 1 second, I'll tell you, Construct Connect is like a holding company, and under Construct Connect, you have iSquareFoot, CMD, Bid Clerk, many other companies under Construct Connect.
So it's channeling all of your bid will go to all of those different entities. Yeah. Under that Construct Connect.
So when I contact Monica Jenkins, who's a senior content specialist at Construct Connect, our advertisement goes on iSquareFoot, CMD, Bid Clerk, and Construction Data.
So there's a number of them. So that was my concern. I just wanted to understand and figure out if there were numerous efforts in trying to get the bids out to the MWBEs.
Yeah.
And that also, if this time we saw where there were low participation, we don't know if that's because those channels, these MWBEs are not connected to. Maybe look at some other channels that you could use to actually reach them.
One other that is not, that is also utilized is Plan Hub. we list the project on Plan Hub. And on this particular project, I'll tell you, we received, I believe, 61 63 proposals on Plan Hub. So it was not only listed on the platforms that I just mentioned through Construct Connect, and it was sent to the Hispanic Contractors Association. It was sent to Dodge Analytics, but it was also listed on Plan Hub, and then it was sent out through Pipeline Suite to all of the normal contractors that were included on the email list that I included as part of Affidavit D.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to understand if there were a number other outlets. I think on our list, we just get the generic Construct Connect, and we saw I square foot, but you know, we didn't understand the volume that you got that came back in.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional questions? Well, I would like to thank you, Chuck and Wilbur, for joining us this evening. Alex Bohannon will provide a follow-up notification to you all regarding your good faith effort.
Thank you. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. I hope you all do as well.
All right. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as Alex said, please submit your scores by tomorrow by 5 p.m. So that he can tally all of the scores and provide you all with a response on if their good faith effort was sufficient or not. Also, please remember to review the minutes from the last two sessions and provide any revisions if needed. And so that way we can begin to assess the recommendations and suggestions. And that way I can provide you all with an update over the next couple of months.
Okay, thank you, Jakira. And while we have Taisha here, Taisha, I just have a quick question that maybe you can answer. I'm not sure if you can or not, but I know that you were attending sessions, I believe, at a state level around MWBE. Do you know if there are any efforts to review the North Carolina, what is this? Hold on, I'm trying to get back to it. The minority business participation goal, good faith efforts. It looked like this is a North Carolina policy.
Hey, good evening, everybody. You may hear my son in the background munch on his chips. Yeah, so I served on the MWBE, the North Carolina MWBE Coordinators Network. And at the time, and Jakira's on, I think Jakira and Alex are on it now. But I believe at the time, the conversation was just around the interpretation of the state MWBE good faith effort, or that statute, and how different municipalities and organizations were interpreting the information. And I recall conversations around, and these are just opinions of colleagues, how difficult it is to, go through the legislative process, and, you need your lobbyists to get that on the priority list of your elected officials in order for change to happen. So it's something that has to be lobbied for. You get the buy-in for it to actually be discussed and modified in a session.
Okay, thank you, Taisha. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
So I know earlier Stephen, I had asked about, well, I asked the committee, this advisory, about a special meeting or extending time in our next meeting to go over Stephen's presentation. In some ways, I think it may be helpful after, after our discussion around whatever letter that was for the 25 points that uses the word negotiate. But I think it would be helpful, maybe if we don't necessarily hear that presentation, but Stephen, I'm wondering if, and I know this is beyond your scope and what you have committed to being a part of this board, but I think it would be very helpful to if you're able to review, willing and able to review our items, our questions, and share an interpretation, your interpretation of those, and then maybe we can look at how it aligns with this North Carolina state, this section 100 good faith efforts that you shared in the chat. But I think it would be very helpful to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that at the minimum, as an advisory, we share the same interpretation. And then from there, we need to find ways to make, we need to find how we can craft an equity policy, because to me, I think that that's what we need. We can continue to go over these good faith efforts, but that's not going to get us closer to closing this disparity gap. I don't see how it will. So Stephen, I guess that's a question, if that's something you're willing to do. And I guess even before you answer that, Shakira, do we have a budget?
For the committee?
Yes.
As far as having someone come and speak to you all?
Yes.
Is that what you're inferring? I would have to see if there's money allocated to that. But what I will say is that I know there was a time in which Angela did provide a presentation on this process. So I can share that presentation with you all again if you would like. I can send it to you all via email, hopefully by, if not by the end of this week, by the beginning of next week.
Okay, and I guess I'm more concerned with how we're interpreting the policy. The policy and these good faith, these questions.
Right, and I can also see if someone from the School of Government would also be willing to come and share their knowledge on the good faith effort process as well. I'm not sure how quick of a response I'll get, but I can look into that.
Okay. Oh, were you going to say something, Stephen?
Oh, I think Jakira can probably chime in, but as far as comparing our city of Winston-Salem, points, or not points, because each one's allocated points, but subsections of the affidavit D to the regulation, I'm pretty sure that they match up exactly. Isn't that right? We just have a little bit of additional color on specific documents that the city of Winston-Salem requests to support each of these things, right?
Correct. And so the general statute mandates what the good faith items are, but we do have a little bit more explicit language on what we would like to see to provide evidence of those things. The statute does require that a 10-point minimum is allocated for each of the items. We do have our good faith effort process is a little bit more stringent than the state. They only require 50 points. We require 115. But essentially, yes, what is listed in our good faith effort is mandated by the North Carolina General Statute, and it's essentially the same.
Okay. Yeah, and I understand that the state is going to be what is precedent. I guess but we do have room to extend it. And I think that, some of these things, they make sense. So the one that speaks to negotiating with the sub, I see how that makes sense and how that could be useful. But, I think that it does not, what we're asking for clearly doesn't go far enough. And even what the city, make it more colorful using, Stephen's language, that still is not helping, and so again, I mean, we need to do something different or do something more or find out, what the issue is. I think there's probably a general issue with capacity. I would imagine that in part is part of the problem. But nevertheless, I just think we need to definitely be on the same page in terms of how we interpret this, this policy, how we're answering these questions. And then we need to just find out what we need to do to begin to address the disparity.
Right. And to your comment, Kelly, the items that are listed in the statute, they have to be in our good faith effort process. It's not that we can essentially create our own good faith effort process. The statute is explicit in what has to be included with the items.
Could we add more, or we have to use what's given?
I don't think necessarily you have to stick to only keeping what they have listed. But the items that they do have listed have to be included, and they have to have at least 10 points allocated to each item.
So that's my understanding of it as well. And it may be a question really for Angela Carmen, the city's attorney, to ask her, what the city's, obligations and options are. I can tell you that without giving you legal advice or giving the committee legal advice, that my understanding of the statute is that each public entity has to include these 10 things, but can require additional good faith efforts to be taken. But I think this is a point that got made talking about the disparity study that was conducted and the types of factors that have to be considered when you're creating these policies. Is you can go too far and actually have someone challenge your procedures and in court and end up in a protracted proceeding that could cost the city a lot of money and that could end up having the policy stricken or limited. So there's a bit of a line that we have to walk in imposing things that or trying to come up with additional things if we wanted to, that would be prudent or beneficial or would incentivize primes to take additional efforts, but not going so far that Angie Carmen comes back and says, you guys are going to get us in trouble. We can't do that. Or actually getting something implemented and it does get the city in trouble. So it's a balance I think we'll have to strike. But I think that's definitely something we would need input from the city attorney's office on.
Yeah. So prior to any of that happening, one, it would have to go through the city attorney's office, and then two, it would have to be approved by city council.
Mm-hmm. Is there, okay, this is my last question. I know we're at 6 o'clock pretty much. So, well, I'll wait. That's probably a longer discussion. But okay, there's a lot to be discussed, but we're not going to fix any of this within even our term. We're not going to fix all of this within our term, but we do need to just stretch ourselves to figure out, what we can do with the time that we do have. All right. Thank you. That's all I have. Jakir, were there any other announcements? I think we shared all the announcements earlier.
Yes, there were any, and I'm not sure if everyone was on the call who is currently on the call now, but Leah Metz was elected as the vice chair of the committee, and so I would like to, welcome her to her new role. Feel free to reach out to me, and just remember to submit your good faith effort scores and provide the revisions for the suggestions and recommendations that you all provide. And before we go, Leah, I did receive a response here during the meeting from the North Carolina School of Government of when the last time the good faith effort process was revised, and that was 2001.
And so just so everybody knows that that's when it was, the statute was enacted in 2001. And then the regulation was provisionally enacted in 2002. And I think it like became a final rule in 2004 or something to that effect. But for the city, it's the statute that really matters. The reg is more for like state agency stuff.
Okay. Great. Well, and it's clear between the disparity study and these percentages that some work needs to be done to bridge the gap there. So I think it begins with us and how we go forward doing this, and then talking to the state and trying to motivate them to change some things.
What I will add is that I am also, like Taisha said, a part of the North Carolina MWBE Coordinators Network. And so I think when she was on, it was, a conversation between all of the colleagues of, who do similar work to us, not necessarily in local government, statewide, the school systems. But they have formed a group in which they're working on getting all of some items, I would say some items together to make a, I would say challenge, but to kind of, infer on why some things are written the way they are, as far as, how minorities are defined, how women are defined. So the Coordinators Network they do have a group of individuals who are looking into all of the things that you also have concerns about as well.
Thank you. Do you know, and this was somewhat going into my question, but since you touched on it, do you know if the Carolina Small Business Development Fund is a part of those conversations?
I am not sure. That would be a question for our president. And if you could, can you please state to me, Kelly, again what that was?
Yeah, the Carolina Small Business Development Fund. So they are a statewide CDFI, the largest in the state. So I think, and if you do have a budget, then I think, yeah, it would, I would love to have a discussion with the advisory to figure out, who could be a good person or organization that we can speak with. And to kind of expand our thinking around what can be. Of course, we will not break the law. I'm sure the city will not allow us to do that anyhow, but we just have to look at what we can do differently. And to Leah's point, there's no need for us to wait on someone else if we can lead the change from right here in Winston-Salem. Okay, does anybody else have anything?
Just a side comment. I know that Charlotte is going to be doing a disparity study here pretty soon. So it'll be also interesting to see what they have to say as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, especially considering some of the larger projects. I mean, it seemed like they've been pretty intentional about increasing their NWBE. So yeah, that's a good point. Okay, well, thank you, Jakira and Alex and Taisha and Hannah and Larry. Alex, Leah, Jordan, Cassandra. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. And I guess, is there a motion to adjourn? Do I need them? Yeah. Oh, this meeting is adjourned. Okay.
I hope everyone has a happy holiday.
Yes, thank you. Okay. All right. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Good Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.